And to further unpack this, we are joined by political analyst Tshepo Kgadima, who joins me live in the studio in Midrand. Thank you very much for joining us. A very good morning to you.
Morning.
Morning. So what do you make of this meeting that will be held between the stalwarts and the ANC SG today?
Interesting meeting, because there are many questions that hopefully after today's meeting, those questions will be answered. But one thing that I think is clear now is that the 106 who up till now they're still a regrouping, it would appear that they need to evolve from being just a grouping to being a structure, because now they have earned a seat at the table. And by earning a seat at the table, which whatever circumstances under which they earn such seat at the table, the question that one wonders is that can they continue to be just a grouping whereby there is not clear as to what are the rules of engagements of those members of that grouping and exactly what is it that they stand for, because it would appear to us that they foresaw a void or a vacuum within the ANC structures as it stands, that they then saw it necessary to organize themselves in the manner that they did and demand a seat at the table. So I think that that's very critical, and maybe today after their meeting, they will clarify that to say, are they just a grouping or are they now going to be formalizing as a structure so that come the policy conference, they will then make a submission for the amendment of the constitution of the ANC so that indeed there can be a legitimately recognized structure. Because if they do not do that, the danger that the ANC sits with is that you can have many other groupings of people who will also demand a seat at the table, and that will create a very challenging situation, be it either the policy conference or even at the general conference. And also the ANC itself will need to speedily resolve the status that they accord to this grouping and many others that might come up. For example, the Save SA, who we believe they got some of the so-called veterans, that they too might demand a seat at the table and might use the same circumstances to demand that they should legitimately be listened. So it's very challenging. But going forward, what can the ANC and this 106, however? I think for the 106, it will be interesting to see within them, they have a number of people, individuals, who are not necessarily agreed to the other group that has been saying they've never demanded the resignation of the president, that they are demanding a consultative conference, but that they want to work within the organization. Whereas you've got others within that grouping who also are using other organizations, be it the non-governmental organization or the civil society organizations, to then go and say messages that are contrary to. So you can't have that situation where you've got people conveniently going with a particular line or using a different structure to advance a cause that doesn't find home and support within that. So it's something that I think this 106, they have to clear that. But very interesting for me, Lauren, is that they also, we are made to understand that they wanting to seek clarity to the reported outcomes of the National Executive Committee meeting. Now, that itself is very challenging, that they too are seeking clarity on those issues. So it says that I think the decisions that were then communicated by the SG last week, is that there a full understanding of all the members of the National Executive Committee? I don't know. And will the Secretary General today, together with the veterans, maybe use an opportunity to what I have held course on and will continue to hold course, that last week's press conference, if anything, the media conference on Tuesday, if anything, really was on the verge of plunging us into a constitutional crisis. Because we see the Constitution of the Republic that demands certain or vests certain powers and authority in the office of President. And yet we had the National Executive Committee as represented by the Secretary General saying that that actually is not the case. And these are some of the things that one can say, well, the 106 stalwarts, because of their wisdom, because of the years that they spent in within the African National Congress, but more so in terms of the years that they spent as legislators, including in the negotiation of the constitution that we have. How do they actually pronounce themselves on this very important matter that, left unchecked, can create a very unprecedented but a very a crisis for the country?
Now, at this stage, how much pull do the stalwarts actually have?
Well, look, it would appear that as far as the National Executive Committee of the ANC is concerned, they have managed to really hold sway, that they are the legitimate voice as a grouping, and that they have value that they can add, they can assist the African National Congress in being able to find itself and be able to progress. The issue is that how do they then translate that goodwill that they have earned with the National Executive Committee into the other structures of the African National Congress, and more so at the grassroots, which is the branches. Because come National Conference, when it comes to voting, they will not be able to field a delegate. The only way that they can have some influence is if they now themselves pledge to go back to the grassroots and start to the expression that I always use, which, by the way, the 106 will know very well, because it was said by one of their own, the late Mzala, which is cook rice in the pot. They have to go and cook rice in the pot. And in their case, to cook rice in the pot is by being in the structures now to translate and use that goodwill that they have of being the elderly that have spent a lot more time, both in terms of the struggle and even in the negotiation, or being the midwives of the democratic order that we have today, that they will then have to, I think, convince the younger ones, but also go to the grassroots. Because right now I'm not convinced that the grassroots of the ANC and ordinary supporters or ordinary citizens have got the same grasp and understanding of the role that this or what they stand for, these stalwarts. The National Executive Committee seems to have that, but now they need to take that throughout the grassroots.
To the grassroots, indeed. Let's talk about the Integrity Commission calling on President Jacob Zuma. What are your thoughts around this? Yeah,
that's a very difficult one. I'm still flabbergasted, to say the least. The National Executive Committee, when it meets, the various officers or elected officials, and more so the president, they table a political report. The Integrity Commission, which was indeed established in 2012 as the resolution of conference, one wonders as to what role. Okay, once they have met with the president and he has given them a brief on the state and the health of the African National Congress, in his capacity as the president of the African National Congress, what exactly can they do with that information? Once they are burdened with that information, what can they do in terms of their work as the Integrity Commission? What will be the outcome? And that's very difficult. That is something that has not been, because the Integrity Commission, to date, there hasn't been any different message coming out of the ANC. Has been that the Integrity Commission will inquire into the conduct of members of the African National Congress, and more so those that are in leadership, to ask questions that is their conduct still within the values and the ethical code of the African National Congress? Are they upholding the values? So the moment you hear that somebody, any leader of the African National Congress, is to have a meeting with the Integrity Commission, you can't help but think that, well, it means that there is a transgression that they are wishing to inquire into, and there's absolutely no way they can explain it differently, because the duties and functions of the Integrity Commission, as we understand from the policy, from the resolution, from the conference resolution of 2012, is precisely that. So I can't see how they can be doing something outside of what they were established for.
It's very suspicious indeed. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on Morning Prime. Yes. That is all we have time for. That is a political analyst, Tshepo Kgadima, who joins me live in studio, talking about the ANC, SG and Stalwarts meeting.